Hello there, I'm Sarah, your natural endometriosis expert. Welcome to my podcast. This is the place to be for information, advice and tips on managing your endometriosis naturally. I've been managing my own endo now successfully for about 20 years, and I've been running my own therapy business since 2008, helping others to do the same. If you're curious to cut through all the noise and rubbish that's out there and learn the key to managing endometriosis with minimal reliance on drugs and surgery, then this is the only podcast you'll need. Let's get started. Hello, is anybody there? It's been a while, but I'm back. Yay! So, welcome. This is the first episode of the brand new series of the Only Endometriosis podcast you need. And I want to start off by saying a couple of thank yous and a couple of sorries. First, the apologies. I am so sorry it's taken me so long to record a new episode of the podcast. I'm going to be explaining a little bit about why that is and what I've been up to. But first, thank you to those who have stuck with me. Also want to say thank you. I've had a couple of people tell me recently how valuable they have actually found this podcast. And that has meant the world to me, because actually when I stopped, it wasn't a conscious decision to stop recording the podcasts, but I kind of fell out of love with it a little bit, and I'll explain a little bit more about that. And I genuinely didn't see the value in it. I thought I'd run out of things to say. I felt like I'd said everything that needed to be said about endometriosis, and it felt like the right time just to keep the podcast floating around in the ether there if anybody wanted to listen to it, just plodding along. It just felt right. I was struggling to find the enthusiasm to come back and keep talking. Bizarrely, so if there's any business coaches listening, please forgive me, but I don't really track what I'm doing, and I know I should. But I started this podcast to try and help women. There is no way of knowing. Well, no, this is rubbish. There is a lot of way of knowing, but I never took the time to figure out if anybody was actually listening. I never looked at my download stats. I just put it out there in the hope that whoever needed to find it would find it. And then when it came to sort of the beginning of last year, I kind of had a bit of a wobble. I was worried that nobody was listening. I was worried that I was just spending my time talking to myself in a darkened room like a little weirdo, without anybody actually listening to anything I said. And then I met a lady on a night out, wonderfully fabulous lady. I hope you're listening. Hopefully you know who you are. And she said she has endometriosis, and she said that actually she had really enjoyed my podcast. She'd listened to every one. She actually binge listened to them, and she said they were so helpful. So thank you very much, Gail. Thank you if you are listening. And that kind of, it filled me with joy, because that was the reason that I started to do the podcast in the first place. But it kind of piqued my interest as well. So I finally figured out how to look at my stats. And that fear that nobody listened sort of but very, very quickly changed into fear that people were listening. I had 12,000 listeners, which is terrifying, and I can't think about that too much. That's why I just blurted over my words, I think. But it then panicked me that people actually were listening. And what if I was talking rubbish? What if I was saying stupid things? What if I was contradicting myself? Because we do change, our opinions change. I just had all of these thoughts and anxieties running through my head, and that caused paralysis. I didn't know what to do. I didn't know how to restart the podcast. I wanted to do it because I was actually talking to a lot of people then about my podcast, and it was surprising how many people had listened to it. The conversations were very positive, and the support for me restarting the podcast was really positive, but I was paralysed by fear. Like I say, initially fear that nobody was listening, then an overwhelming fear with the realisation that people were. So I ignored the podcasts for another couple of months. It was on my to-do list. It's on my big whiteboard of things that I need to do. But it didn't feel as if it was urgent. There wasn't that pull to do it. The anxiety overwhelmed any sense of excitement and joy that I normally have talking about or talking into the podcasts. And so the podcast sat there for another couple of months. I have been incredibly busy. I'm going to talk in the next episode about change and why we need to embrace change, but why positive change can really still feel incredibly, incredibly difficult. But I've had so many changes in the last 18 months of my life. I met and married my soulmate. We met and married within months. We had a fabulous long honeymoon. We came back, had our first Christmas together, bought our first house together. That was an excruciating process. It took just over 6 months. It was filled with anxieties and house sale fall throughs, house purchase fall throughs. It was a bit of a nightmare. I moved house, obviously, changed location. So with that, because I work for myself, because I was seeing women from my old house, the business changed. I had to reinvent the business, which is great. It filled me full of excitement. My business, and I'll talk about my business in a second, but my business has changed completely. I've simplified it. I've really honed down on who I can help, how I can help them. And I have a model that I think can help so many more women if I stay focused. That's the big if. But we'll come to that at some point, I'm sure. But the podcast fits really nicely into that because it's something that I can do relatively easily. It's something that I can help women on their own terms. They don't have to pay me. They don't have to come out of their comfort zone. They don't have to come and see me. They can literally just listen to this podcast as and when. So if you're listening to this, this is obviously the time and the space that you feel comfortable to listen to my ramblings and hope that you're going to get some sort of solace or some sort of support from it, which is fabulous. But with all of that anxiety came this incredible opportunity to reshape the business. So I now have distinct pillars to my business. For those of you who don't know, after COVID, I came out of COVID, decided to go into workplace wellbeing. So essentially what I do is go and talk to businesses about endometriosis, not just about endo, but about menopause, about baby loss, about fertility and IVF, about domestic violence, about everything that's covered in the women's health strategy. I go in and I support employers to support the women in their team and people who love the women in their team, because women's health is not just about women, as we very well know ourselves. So that's kind of the biggest strand of my business, and it's actually been quite... a struggle isn't the right word, but it's certainly been harder to make that switch from treating individual women to going into businesses. It's certainly been a lot harder than I anticipated. So a lot of my time in the last 18 months has been devoted to ramping up how I deliver that aspect of my business, because I hadn't given it the nurture that it needed. And it was on the verge of kind of petering out. So I needed to give that aspect of my business some love, which I have done. That's been incredible. I'm working with some fabulous organisations, and I'm hoping to be working with even more fabulous organisations in the future. But we now have systems, we have processes, we have people who can help make that happen, which is great. Then the other side of my business is obviously the treating women. I had to stop that when I sold my house. My little treatment room in the garden had to close. And because of the uncertainty around the house buying and the house, well, not the house selling necessarily, but the house buying, I didn't know where I'd be. So I couldn't commit to a space either in a home or in another location. I couldn't commit with any certainty without knowing what was going to happen. But last month I agreed rental on a space, so just for one day a month. So Tuesday afternoons and Wednesday mornings. So it's one day spread across 2 days. I am back to seeing face-to-face women again, because I really miss that aspect of it. This is what I am born to do. This is what I love doing. I'm very good at it. So I'm helping women from a hair salon in Leyland in Lancashire, if you are local. I'm still doing the online support as well. So if you do want to chat to me about your endometriosis, if you do want to chat to me about your menopause, about anything women's health, then I offer online consultations as well. I've actually narrowed down the slots that are available, but there are still some available. And then one thing I also did at the turn of this year, yeah, blimey, time flies, at the turn of this year was to launch women's circles. I've always wanted to host women's circles. It's something that has been on my agenda since before. Well, I was going to say before I started the women's health stuff. That's not strictly true, but probably about the same time. So around 2008, I think I went to my first women's circle, and it was viewed very differently back then as it is now. But it's always been something that I wanted to do. And for some reason, I decided in the midst of first Christmases, in the midst of first New Year's, in the midst of all this new family, new house, new business, well, not new business, but revitalised business, I decided that it would have been a good idea to start up a women's circle. Goodness knows why, but I launched that in January. So that's been something that's been really, really busy as well. I'm actually taking a step back from that for the rest of the year because I have to, again, just to nurture the other things that are going on. So that's what's been happening. That's why you haven't heard from me. Change, big, big, big thing. Big anxiety-inducing thing for me and for everybody. No matter how positive the change, and that was a massive stumbling block. The fear, like I say, that people weren't listening, then the absolutely terrifying realization that actually people were. So thank you again if you're tuned into this episode. And then simple time, lack of routine, lack of certainty in a routine, not feeling like I could commit to anything really that I had going on. But all that has changed. I am almost back to a normal routine, and I will talk about that in the coming episodes. I'm almost back to a normal routine. The business is settled down nicely. I've decided what I need to focus on, what I can let go for now. Just a temporary let go, nothing major. And what I can devote my precious energy to. And one of those is the podcast. So again, thank you so much, Gail, for your positive feedback over beer. That was very welcomed. Thank you to all of you who have taken the time to get in touch, because I do appreciate it. And even if I haven't replied, I think I've replied to most people, if not everybody. But if there is anybody I've missed, then I do apologise. I do read all of your emails, and I am incredibly grateful for all of your feedback. And I don't expect it all to be positive either. So if you do have feedback in terms of anything I could be doing better, like, I don't know, actually editing these, that might be a thing. It's never going to happen. I don't know if you can actually hear the dog snoring right this minute, but that's the kind of thing that I like to think makes it real, but it might put some of you off. I don't know. Similarly, if there's anything you'd like to hear me talk about, I've kind of got a bit of an overview for the coming months, but it's by no means set in stone. So if there's something that you would like to talk about, if there's an overwhelming issue you have, and you'd like to hear about it on a podcast, feel free. I am still doing my women's health clinics every Tuesday. Not every Tuesday, that would be exhausting. The first Tuesday of every month. It's held on a lunchtime. It's a virtual webinar, so you never know who else is on the call. You can't see the names or the faces of the people on the call. You can ask questions either on email to me before we start, and I will answer them on the session, or you can ask them live in the chat directly to me. You don't have to put them in the public chat if you don't want to, but you are more than welcome to submit questions. Everybody who registers gets a recording, so you don't have to watch it live, you don't have to attend live. Your question will be answered whether you are there or not. And then if you get a recording, you can hear me answer your questions. Or, like I say, you can just ask me to ramble in a podcast about it. So that's me. That's the first episode. I'm not doing this one on the Sunday. I'm going to do a couple of episodes just to kind of catch up with things. Then we'll be back to the regular release on a Sunday, and then hopefully for all of next year you'll get to listen to me. It's not going to be all about endometriosis. I am going to be talking about things that impact our health and well-being and can really trigger our symptoms, but it's all going to be useful stuff in terms of managing symptoms, in terms of reducing symptoms, and in terms of post-op recovery, in terms of long-term symptom management. And even if you haven't got endometriosis, if you just struggle with, not just, but if you struggle with periods, if you're struggling with your menopause transition, if you've got fibroids, polycystic ovaries, it's all going to be helpful. And again, if there's anything even around fertility or baby loss that you would like to chat to me about or hear a podcast on, please do let me know. Thank you very much for listening. I can't wait to record the next episodes. Let me know if there's anything you need from me, and I shall speak to you soon. Thank you so much for tuning in today. I really hope that you found this podcast helpful. If you did, please hit follow so you can listen to more, and please also share it with anyone else who you think will benefit. And don't forget, if you're looking for women's health treatments, workshops, or support within your workplace, you can find all of my services, including our monthly virtual clinic, over at www.healthyandwomenshealth.com. I'll see you next time.